Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is...
Rowan Weathers.
Who is Rowan Weathers?
A jackass of all trades. I do a lot of things, mostly improv, music, stand-up, and poetry these days.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Because you're a jackass of all trades, let's just get into one or many of these. Or actually, no, wait. Let's get into before any of these. Where are you from? How'd you grow up? How'd you get here?
Yeah. So I was born in Texas, but I was in Oklahoma City before I was one. And so, I grew up on the South Side. I went to Western Heights, and lived in a small town for a little while. Gave me some good perspective. And then moved to Norman, which gave me a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And now I have tried 3 different flavors of Oklahoma. I'd like to get back to my original flavor. But yeah, that's how I got here.
Yeah. And then, creativity, art, the performance, whatever. How'd you get into these things?
The first thing I got into was drawing. And I think drawing was just always a safe thing to do. You don't get in trouble too much for drawing in class, or things like that. I joined band when I was in middle school. I was in the percussion section. I was with the cool kids. And I did some arranging on my computer, but I didn't feel good about exploring too much music. I was one of 5 kids, so if I had to learn instruments too much in the house, it was detrimental to 6 other people. So, so I just kind of dropped off of that. I wasn't in band my senior year. And then got back into that after the pandemic when someone asked me to be in a band after I did drunk karaoke and sang Goodbye Earl. It's a long story. Then next up was comedy. I started that in fall 2021. Classic story, being told you're funny for a very long time, so you decide to prove it by going on a stage and bombing. So, it's been fun exploring that. And then after that was improv. Improv I joined because I was in a D&D group and I did a bunch of role playing, and this guy kept on pestering me saying you'd really love it, you'd be really good at it. And I saw improv shows, and improv has to be good to not look bad. It's really hard. So I saw a couple shows and was I'm never ever going to do that. And then I just was at a point where I needed to try a bunch of different things to figure out if I liked them or not. So then I did improv. Finally, poetry was when Jarvix actually saw me performing guitar at an open mic. And he was you'd really like these poetry people. And then these poetry people were your lyrics are basically poems. And so then I started writing poems.
Yeah, lyrics are poetry. For anyone that didn't think that I don't know if I can write poetry, but I'm a singer-songwriter. It's it's just it's a whole different thing to assert that your words and the music are an important part than it is to see it as all one cohesive piece. If that makes any sense. You have to be very assertive in poetry about what you're doing, because you're going on a stage and telling a bunch of strangers all about your deepest feelings. And yeah. It doesn't have to be your deepest feelings.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. I just choose to do that.
Actually, yeah, let's go on to something that we talked about kind of beforehand. You are very open about everything.
Yeah.
Has that always been a thing for you?
No. As a kid, I was super, super private. Nobody could know specifically anything that was wrong with me. And then, the way that happens is you're a human, you're a social creature. You can't live your life not telling people what's wrong with you. So that bubble just naturally popped when I was 19, and a bunch of other stuff happened. And I went to therapy, and, you know, in therapy, they teach you like a lot about vulnerability and like learning to find people that you can trust and be open with. And then if you're in it for even longer, you learn how to like process when people break your trust. So nowadays I feel pretty comfortable telling almost anybody like my deepest, darkest secrets, because I just know if they like use that against me, I'll be able to process and recover from that. Like if you're going to be an asshole, I'll just cry for a bit. It'll be fine.
Right. And that's also kind of their problem and not as much yours.
Exactly. I'm like, if you have, I don't know, beef about my childhood trauma or whatever, like, I don't know, go to therapy is what I always say.
Therapy's expensive.
Oh God, yeah, I know. I've stopped saying that as much because I'm like, shh, I am kind of throwing people in the deep end.
So I don't know, like it takes a lot to do all of these like emotionally and creatively taxing things. It takes courage. What gives you the courage? Or maybe it's naivete or whatever. Like I identify a lot with being a lot of different things. Like I identify with being a jack of all trades. So I don't necessarily feel like I'm split between multiple identities. I think initially it did scare me a lot how much I was interested in different things. And I stopped myself from exploring a lot of things because I identified as an artist. So I was like, I'm an artist. And that means I can't pick up a guitar or like do stand up, even if people are telling me that like it'd be a good thing to explore. So I think one, it's like gaining the courage within myself to do that. I think another facet of it is like my life is something that must be thoroughly lived right now, you know, like, you know, I take care of my mom and I take care of my brother, and that's like a lot of emotions. And when you have a lot of emotions, you got to do stuff to get them out. And, you know, I've heard great things about meth, but I decided to do poetry instead. So, I mean, it looks crazy, but it's just because like, you know how like anytime someone goes through a breakup, they have to like make an album. Mm-hmm. That's just my life. Like I have to, like I'm constantly experiencing like some form of like grief. Mm-hmm. So I need to consistently process it in a variety of ways. And then what was the last thing? Oh, the last thing is that my therapist encouraged me once I got diagnosed with ADHD to set up positive distractions. So it's like, if you don't want to be distracted from practicing guitar by the phone, then you put the drum set next to the guitar. And if you don't want to be distracted from both of those by the phone, then you got to put something else there. And that's just sort of compounded. Yeah. And then there's also like the community aspect of it. So like, for anyone who is a creative in Oklahoma, I hope that by now you've noticed that there's at least some sort of community around creativity and the arts here. So tell me about what you do in the community. And yeah.
My favorite thing right now is the Red Dirt Poetry Open Mic. One, like everybody's really nice and there's a very good community there. And everybody's like really eagerly listening to what you have to say. Especially if you're new, I would say. You know, they all like talk to each other afterwards, which is like at an open mic that there's only a few open mics in the city where that's a thing. I enjoy the music community. I would say like I don't get that same level of kinship, but it is nice to like mosh every once in a while and you're like, we're all doing this together. Like we used to do this in caves and stuff, and now we do it to some guy crying about his mom or whatever. But and then the improv community is very it's very fun. It has its issues just like any comedy community, but well, any community period. But But I do like that, improv as an art requires you to trust people in a way that you've probably never trusted someone before. So you have to learn. Like, you aren't going to be good at it if you don't learn.
Yeah. And I do think that like each one of these communities has their own like stuff and
yes.
like
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
and like, yeah, what you said about like, oh, not every open mic does have the like talking to people afterwards. And it's like, how do we, I don't know, something that I think about a lot with this podcast, especially now that it's been going for so long, is about like kind of actively creating communities instead of just like being embedded within them. And so it's like, how do we establish a community that we're happy with? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily that you have an answer to that, but more so just like I
have some thoughts. I don't have an answer. I think they're like a bunch of communities need different like family roles, basically. Like some hosts serve as like a mom, like they're actively encouraging people to talk to each other and you should like go out for coffee, or like this thing is going to have an after party, you should come. There are people who are more like big siblings who are like, hey, don't do that, like, but in a chill way, like you're not out per se, but stop that. And then, you need people who are like little zany kids that entertain the rest of us. Those are all the people who do the weird shit that make us remember why we're all doing this in the first place. But I think we need all sorts of different people. And I think if you like know enough about yourself to recognize what you are good at in a community, just really lean into that. Like, if you find yourself personable, talk to people. If you find yourself more shy, but you're like good at organizing things or at social media, whatever you want to lean into, lean into.
Yeah. And community means so much more, especially in like creative scene, but it also means so much more in this creative scene, which is Oklahoma specifically. Yeah. What is it like being a creative person in all of these endeavors in Oklahoma specifically?
I guess I'm friends with a lot of different kinds of creatives, and like a lot of them are very frustrated with it, which I relate to and understand. Like, it is kind of crazy to imagine living in a city where there's like a dozen poetry open mics to pick from, or like more than one improv scene, but I think because there's so little, it motivates certain people to like be like, if this is all we have, better be good, Now it motivates other people to be like, this is all we have, so take what you can get. But you get a little bit of both. I have never envisioned myself becoming famous for any kind of art, so I guess I don't end up having feelings much about that because it was never on the table, But I imagine, for people who do want that, and it's totally cool to want that, that must be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point, which helps me find direction for where we're going, which is just like, since being famous or whatever isn't a goal for you, what is your goal in these creative endeavors and being this jack of all trades?
I've been thinking about that a lot. This is one of the questions I had to think about. I think what I find myself naturally doing is encouraging people to be in multiple communities. I notice that a lot of people get tired. Let's say there's a musician. A lot of musicians will get tired of the music community and will burn themselves out, frankly. And I think part of the reason is because they're just doing music and they're expecting all the communal love that they could possibly get from a community to be from the music community. Well, no one community is ever going to do that for you. It'd be like having one friend and expecting that friend to be your everything. So, you know, I find myself in improv. Improv has a ton of these people, like people who just do improv. I find myself constantly be like, let's go to stand up. Let's go to a local show. I think I'd like to bridge the communities more. I think in the future, I'd like to host some kind of variety show where like I would use the fact that I know a bunch of people from different things to like be like, hey, go to this venue and you see a comic and then you see a band and then you see an improv show and then you see a poetry reading and then there's a gallery in the back or whatever. Because I think everybody would benefit from doing multiple things, but that might be my projection.
Yeah. Right. And the community needs people like you as well, right? So instead of having just like the people who are trying to go all the way, whatever that means, like anyone who anyone has heard of has had those people be sort of their launching off point so that they can, you know, have anything to start with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a lot less intimidating when you know someone already. Like, I did not start music until someone literally was like, I want to start a band and you were in percussion in high school. Figure it out. Like, you know, otherwise I'd still be like only an artist because I was so scared to do anything else. So as much as I can encourage that. And also life creates better art. And so like, if you want to make better drawings, you should probably try a different creative thing, you know, same for anything else.
Yeah. Do you feel like because of all of these things, do you get like discouraged whenever you're like not meeting your standards on like one of them?
Yeah, especially like the things I developed. I noticed the hobbies I developed before therapy versus like after a bunch of therapy, I have completely different feelings about. If I draw a hand that's bad, I might as well jump in the river. Like, you know, but you know, if I make a poem that I think is like dumb, I'm just like, oh, whatever, we'll get them next time, boys, you know? But you know, I do feel it. Like, I'm completely aware of the fact that like, I'm going to be a master of none, like, because I am not doing anything a bunch. The only thing that I would say I'm like good enough to be considered professional in or whatever would be art, because I solely did that for so long. And even then I choose not to, because it turns out that's a very hard grind. So
yeah. But I mean, like, whatever professional means, like, you just,
that's true.
You do commission sometimes, you get paid for it. That's like that's professional.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So I think like, yeah, there is sometimes like I definitely overextend myself. My sleep schedule is a nightmare because I'm going to so many different things. But it feels nice to be so immersed in the community. I didn't have that before, I would say 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's good to find that again, also just like post pandemic, that like once you've been so isolated for so long, to see that there actually is community out here. What advice do you have for people that want to be parts of these things?
Let me think. I think if you can go to the Red Dirt Poetry Open Mic, go there. I would also recommend Fair Weather. I know those are both in Oklahoma City, so sorry about it. But I think easy thing just about anybody can do to find community for just one night is well, you have to be 21, but you have to go to a karaoke bar. Okay. If you need to get blasted to do this, get blasted and arrange an Uber home. But do a karaoke song that is like silly and goofy and horrendous, and you will have a community right there. Especially if you do it later in the night, they're all going to be singing along with you. Do something popular like Mr. Brightside, and you will feel community in that moment. That can be the beginning of you finding something that works for you. And if you write, chances are there's a writer's thing. If you draw, there's artist things. If you do music, go to music. Whatever you find yourself guided to. We have a video game bar. Everybody plays video games these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Internet in between the things, which is that, like, I don't know, it's hard to find community locally whenever there's like the internet is real life, right? Or at least as of 2020, the internet is real life. So I guess, like, how do we connect that? Or, like, I don't know, what is your internet community, or has that fallen by the wayside in favor of your in-person community?
I mean, I would definitely say I have an internet community. Like, I notice there are people I interact with way more online than I ever do in person. And there are these people I have like parasocial relationships with because I maybe like saw them at a gallery but didn't say anything, but I followed their Instagram. So we've never talked, but we've been in the same spaces. I definitely prefer the real deal more. I just think while the internet is real, you choose just about everything that gets on there. And so nobody gets, and while, you know, there is something to be said about how we all put on our personas in a daily life. If you're going out and you're trying your best to be genuine in a creative space, then that's as close as you can to having like an accurate first impression. And you let people get to know the real you, and hopefully you're also getting to know the real people. So yeah, I take a lot of internet stuff with a grain of salt now. Am I constantly looking at who watched my story? All the time. Like, those hearts are my Prozac right now. Like, but I recognize that, like, that's not bueno or like a good thing to be doing per se.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, also in these creative communities, we tend to have, like, I don't know, is Tumblr still alive?
I think it's being revived because Twitter's going down and Tumblr reinstated porn. So
Okay.
that might be its saving grace.
I feel like in these creative communities, like, Tumblr sort of turned that into like 11 to where, like, hey, we're this community. If you're not like with this thing, then like get the fuck out. And also, like, these are all the weird things that we're going to normalize. I guess, like, yeah.
I think America has done a great job with individualism. They really popped off on that one. Because, like, everybody seems to be really, really convinced that, not everybody, I'm making generalizations, but a lot of people seem to be very convinced that they are very individual and like would not be understood and have unique problems that nobody could possibly understand. And that you may have a unique problem that nobody could understand, but you also probably have a bunch of problems that a lot of people could understand. And in your journey of finding these people to love and trust, you could find someone that has that unique problem or understands it from a perspective you would have never thought of. And so I think there's like a lot of fear in like going out and trying to make these close adult friendships that don't manifest the way that seeing someone 5 days a week does. But you just have to. Like, you will crash and burn. You will get hurt. You will have friendships end, and you will have new friendships begin. You just gotta. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, there's like almost 8 billion people on the planet. So they all have experiences that are at least human, so somewhat similar to yours. But also the rest of all of existence that people have lived. I promise you, your experience is like, it might be pretty unique.
Yeah.
But like some small piece of what you're experiencing, someone else has experienced something like it as well.
People go to different countries and fall in love with someone who grew up on like the other side of the world. I promise you, the people that are in the city you live in, you know, are going to have something in common with you. So especially, I would say, in Oklahoma City, like, I've been very surprised over and over again by people that could really understand and the community love that I frankly was not expecting. So,
yeah. But then the greater, like, I guess this is a little bit of what I was going for earlier, talking about like what Oklahoma does to the community, but like what the like political ramifications of like, yes, we're like making cool safe spaces for queer people in our like creative communities, but like fucking Oklahoma isn't.
Yeah. I was just thinking being trans is going to be so hardcore now. Like there's going to be a drug dealer that's going to be like, you want Vegeta Blue or Celeste Pink? Like, but yeah, I mean, it's disheartening. I think, I frequently think about like going somewhere and like being in this community that would be more accepting, or a state that would be more accepting. I think nowadays I focus a lot more about what I can control. Like, I did a lot of disability activism before the pandemic. That was like my main deal then. And you know, you can only go up to the Capitol so many times before you're like, this doesn't do much. At a certain point, my representative at the time, like, used my handwritten note about working as a home healthcare worker as a coaster for his coffee. And I don't know. I think at a certain point, I realized my efforts would be much better spent. Instead of waiting for like the big world to get better, I need to focus on the small world. And what I can do to make people feel welcome around me, and what I can do to learn to do things in case things go to crap, like going to the compost lot and things like that. Like, if I can't focus on it too much or else I go crazy. So
yeah. Yeah. And it is very just hard to like, wow, this shit's getting real weird and real crazy. And like, yeah, these are the things we can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'll vote, but I also understand at this point, like, how much the majority of votes, like, don't mean much, but I still, you know, put my coin toss in. But yeah, I think the change you're going to see in your community is from you connecting with someone who is trans, or you know, writing a song for your friend that is really sad about rent prices, or, you know, whatever. You can do things to make people feel better around you without having to fix the initial problem. It would be lovely to fix the initial problem, but I don't think we're there.
Yeah. And I mean, like, that's kind of where the like rugged individualism actually like does matter.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's you got a good point there.
Yeah. Where it's like if you are actually like interacting with your community and like what you can deal with,
Yeah.
then that actually does shape the rest of everything.
Yeah, no, I've thought like there's that famous episode of The Last of Us with the gay couple, and I was like, okay, so I just have to attract a libertarian. I do have the skills to survive. Like, I'll be fine. I do that on accident all the time. But yeah, like I think, there's a lot of skills. Like you don't necessarily have to know how to like fight or farm and stuff. We'll need healthcare workers. Do you think you could hold a baby for like 4 hours at a time? That will be a valuable skill. Like,
Sure.
And hopefully we won't need it. But if we do, just know you're probably solid.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be okay.
Yeah. Into like some of the like default questions that I haven't used in a while. What's something people don't normally know about you, even though you put all of yourself out there all the time?
What a great question. I was nominated for prom queen. I know I don't look the type, but all our class was like very separated, the way a lot of public schools are. So like all the honors kids nominated me and my boyfriend at the time because we were like, we've been dating since freshman year, so they thought it'd be cute. Didn't get it, but I was nominated. And I'm willing to bet that will surprise people.
And look at you now.
Woo! Big Skippy. That's what improv does to you people. You just shout Big Skippy.
Knocks him dead every time. Switching gears into the questions that make bit depth. What is the role of spirituality or religion in your life?
So I don't go to church. I was raised Episcopalian, which is diet Catholic. There's no hell. So was lucky to get away with no religious trauma. I just think I struggled to ever believe that there was like an order going on at all. I love astrology. Got into it for the memes. I won't lie. I can't say I like see my horoscope and I'm like, yeah, that's for sure Z's gonna happen. But I am like, all right, heads up, tarot cards I use more just to figure out how I'm feeling about something. Like if I have a crush on someone and the tarot cards say like, actually they suck. If I'm bummed about it, I know that I actually like them. If I'm elated, that means that I probably didn't like them in the first place. But there's no like regular God or thing I worship. I go back and forth as to whether like things are alive or there's things out there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That gives me a very broad thing to work with.
I have very Libra ass answers about all of these. I'm like, it might be this, but it might be that. Like, I don't
know. You told me what you grew up with. How has that shaped where you are now?
Yeah. I think like out of all the Christianities I have heard about, because like as a grown up, I was very surprised to learn of other people's experiences. I was like, whoa, that sucks for you guys. But, I think like one, it like that religion is a like cord around forgiveness. Like Jesus died and everything is forgiven. Like everybody's in heaven, so live your life. And also, like, I was told when I was considering being agnostic or atheist, like, oh, yeah, people leave the faith and come back all the time. So, like, it kind of helped build this idea of, like, unconditional love and forgiveness, which I think is maybe some of the best nuggets of wisdom you could get from a religion. I do think there were like some issues, but it looks like nowadays in that church they're mostly resolved. I immediately forget the questions when you ask them. But shaped.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, yeah, I would say I learned a lot about forgiveness, and to at least seek it out no matter the circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your definition of God?
I think God has way more to do with the people that believe in them than it does with anything actually out there. I think there is something real about everybody coming together and choosing to support one thing. And that it doesn't really matter so much if like the Catholic God is real. He is real for the sake of our world because a bunch of people believe in the Catholic God. Now, if that ever changes, then I think he'll be less real. But, you know, if at the end of the day, it makes a bunch of people go to the same place on Sundays or Saturdays, and if it makes people like drink this wine at a certain time or put water on their head, if a bunch of people are doing the same thing because of one guy, then that guy's real, you know? So, I guess my definition of God is the people organizing around a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is free will?
Another thing I bounce between. I think I have a hard time defining choice in my head. And sometimes I split it up between like options and choices. Like we don't really get choices, but we do get options. We get options all the time. Like you can always choose what movie you want to see, or if you want to see a movie at all. While you don't get to choose that you need to use the restroom, you do get the option of where you want to go to the restroom. But then, you know, there's the big things, like a big chunk of your life is determined on what zip code you were born in and like basically what DLC packs you have, like what color you are and your identity and all that stuff, whether you choose to explore your identity or not. So I think free will right now for me is this wishy-washy ball of gray that constantly plagues my drives to and from Norman.
Cool. Sorry for because you listened to the podcast. Sorry for making that even grayer.
Yeah, you started it, buddy. I was not thinking about it and now it's like a daily thing.
It gets easier. You just disregard it over
I'm used to living in confusion. I'm aware of what I'm about.
What do you think happens when we die?
I think part of me thinks that we just get to go. I think like there's just nothing. Part of me thinks you get to be in stuff, or you get to be like a ghost that does nothing for a while. Like you get to be a ghost that gets to throw one napkin at like a critical time, you know, or you get to be a willow tree and see what that's all about. I do consistently think that like some part of you is always alive, even if you aren't in something, as long as you are remembered. And I think a lot of people believe that. That's why like Cleopatra was like, I better go out good. But you know, and why a lot of people like seek to be loved and things like that. Because I do think like at least a part of you is always alive as long as you are loved and thought of. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you determine what good behavior is?
I kind of have a hard ass opinion on good behavior, which is different from a lot of my opinions that are very wishy washy. I think, like, well, part of it is defined by what it isn't. So, like, I think good behavior can't just be not doing bad. Like that's just neutral behavior. If you didn't punch someone, you didn't do a good thing. You did a neutral thing. You have to do something that has a positive consequence. Like you aren't a good person because you aren't like bigoted. Mm-hmm. You are a good person if you are purposely anti-bigoted. Mm-hmm. And so on and so forth with everything that we consider evil in the world. But they do kind of define each other. Like, you know, I noticed that I'm always circling my definition of good around what evil is. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I get lost in that.
Yeah. How do we reduce the division between people?
I think getting a bigger lens is crucial for a lot of people. I was kind of a liberal asshole, like everything was black and white, and thought people were like stupid rednecks and stuff until I moved to a small town and I realized like, oh, there's a reason like why. One, when liberals come there, they're like, let me talk slow, you know? And yeah, so that's how I gain more perspective anyways. I could always get more. You know, I've only lived long-term in Oklahoma. But I think the main way to do that is just living differently as often as you can.
Yeah. Just because I want to chase this a little bit. Yeah. What did you learn about that, like, shift in perspective of, like, you know, when you're surrounded by conservative people and you start to understand them, it's not like, you know, as a leftist person, he's like,
well, I think one of the big pushes is that I started most of my activism in the disability community. And in that community, the only way we have had success is by working with Republicans. Because, like, frankly, the Democrats aren't going to win anything. And I was very surprised, like, when we were working on closing public institutions, Democrats were actually against us on that because they wanted to keep those jobs. Mm-hmm. And we were like, but there'll be so many jobs once it's gone because they all have to be in staffed houses. And so discovering, like, I was very surprised about the sides on that issue. And I experienced that surprise several times. I think I also, you know, I found myself struggling to support Democrats in a lot of measures when I did live in a small town, because it was a bunch of stuff that wasn't going to come back to me, you know, like, I think a lot of times Democrats, and I say Democrats specifically because I don't think leftists are in the same camp, but absolutely not. I think Democrats specifically see the South and the rural South as like a lost cause. And I'm like, your average city Democrat is a bootlicker compared to your Republican redneck living in Wayne, Oklahoma. Like, that guy has punched a cop and like called his mom to tell him to tell her that she made something stupid. Like, you know, I think, yes, like, the right has done a great job with phrasing and making a bunch of what would be good things for the rural areas sound like big, scary words like mutual aid and healthcare and things like that. You know, they made them into scary words. But when you actually like talk to them about what that would mean for the community, they're on your side. Like, nobody in Purcell wants to pay that 10-15% tax to support the hospital before Medicaid expansion happened. Now, I'm sure they came up with a different reason to tax people 15%. But before then, we had a really good argument. We were like, hey, don't you hate how your groceries cost, 10 to 15% more because of one hospital that doesn't even do appendicitis surgeries? When you tell them what that actually means, like, you don't use all the buzzwords and all that stuff. When you tell them what it would mean for them, you make a lot of progress. And that's what I'm saying again about like people widening their horizons and like learning how to connect with other people is when you're talking to different communities, you're speaking different languages. And you have to be patient with yourself and you have to be patient with others to trust that if a connection is going to happen, it's going to happen.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about just like more of your like activism in the disability community. So like what brought you into that and like, what was your journey through that?
Yeah. So my brother Henry was born with a congenital heart defect. So like growing up, he was like very consistently, that book In Between Kingdoms where they talk about like, okay, it's a great book about like illness in general, but like he lived in between of like, we never knew if he was like about to die or if he was like going to make it. And then when he did get to a spot where we were like, he's going to make it, he had developed an intellectual disability over that time. And so my mom got involved with the Oklahoma Developmental Disabilities Council, and her name is Erin Taylor, and a bunch of people are going to recognize that name. And she was a rock star in that community. She taught this class called Partners in Policymaking that was all about teaching self-advocates and family members and different community members what the issues are in the state currently and what you can do about them on a variety of different scales, whether it's lobbying or hiring or whatever. So I was volunteering with her as a kid. And then eventually I was in Partners in Policymaking and I was working in home health. And the wages for home health are terrible. Like the state gives the company. So like I worked for Thinkability first. So the state would give Thinkability $15 an hour for every hour that they served a person. And then out of that $15, they have to pay us. And the minimum you can pay a home person is like $8.16, which is messed up. Like the amount of work you're doing, it's emotional. It's very physical. It's a lot of things. Like you're taking care of a human being, usually 3 human beings, with, need stuff that you probably aren't that experienced in. And doing that and seeing the issues like transportation sucks, living sucks. You can't make more than $11.80 a month or else you lose everything, including your chair if it's on loan. Then I was just going to the Capitol at least 3 or 4 times a year each season. And that was very exhausting. And then I worked at a nonprofit community center called Among Friends in Norman, where I was the program director. And we did that through a bit of COVID, and we just ran through problem after problem after COVID. The building flooded, it was covered in mold, and then we found another building, but then that building had an issue with the ramp, and then we were going to delay that, and it just all fell apart. And after that, I was just sort of like, I was 24. I'd been volunteering in disability stuff since I was 14. I was just sort of like, I've done enough. I have no idea what I like. All I know is how to serve this population that like just recently burned me. So like, I don't know anything about myself. So careful with your activism, kids. Take a break.
Yeah. That's thank you for sharing all of that and being comfortable enough to share that. The fire can only burn for so long before it burns you.
Yeah.
I guess there's no way to transition out of that until just by like going into
Make it
the next
smooth.
question. Yeah, there is no smoothness. Do you believe humans are evil by nature?
No. I recently got into an argument with my friend Sam about this. Actually, I find myself getting miffed about this. I lean personally towards good, but I understand the argument for neutral. The time I realized that I thought humans were good was kind of funny because I saw this Minecraft server and it was like a bunch of 11-year-olds and all they wanted to do was make a Pokemon server. And in the Pokemon server, they all like worked together. Like if Danny wanted to pick flowers, then that was his job. And if Carly wanted to build houses, that was her job. And if Jimmy wanted to mine, then that was his job. And they just kind of like did it as they wanted to. And I understand Minecraft is a world without consequences. Like if nobody kills the sheep, it's not like anybody's going to starve. But at the same time, I was like, this is what people naturally do. Like when they have the choice, they choose to be chill. And I think also biologically, because we're social creatures and that we were meant to, always exist around each other and move with each other. We have a core incentive to do right by each other. It might be for selfish desires of survival or whatever, but it doesn't matter in the end. Like, I know a philosophy person is going to be like, yes, it does matter. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and say it doesn't matter. If you give the kid the bread because you think one day that kid might give you bread, you still gave the kid bread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think humanity is heading towards in the future?
Great question. So, I have a lot of thoughts about the recent future, especially with the trans stuff passing. Like, is there going to be a trans drug trade? What does that even look like? What is it? Like elders in the queer community are so vital now because they're going to have to teach all of us what it really meant to live before because we're going back there. Except now they know about us. There's no ignorance anymore, I guess. In terms of the long future, I do see like what we are currently doing is clearly not going to be able to go on forever. When it does collapse, whether it's like the environment or just one last recession to rule them all, I would like to say that, some communities are going to be okay. There's going to be some hippy dippy communes that, teach random kids how to compost and stuff and, survive off of carrots or whatever. And that's going to be fine. Like the temperature is going to suck. The climate's going to suck, but chances are they're going to be fine. There are going to be some communities that suck. And, I think, personal responsibility in what you are to a community will matter a lot more. Maybe that's why I'm involved in everything, trying to check all my boxes.
Yeah. What are you optimistic about for our future or your future?
I like where my life is headed. I have never felt more regularly good about myself than I have these last couple of years. I'm in a rough patch right now, taking care of my mom, but that always gives me something to look forward to. Like there's something nice about being aware that you live in the Black Plague because the Black Plague ends. So however happy I feel now, that's going to be even better when this is done. I'm excited to see how like being involved in all these different communities will come to fruition. Maybe I'll host that show I was thinking about, or maybe I'll create my own space. I don't know. And I'm excited for like small, dumb human shit too. Like I'm excited to fall in love. I'm excited to meet new people and have new friends. I think I'm going to live a good life if I'm being real. Yeah.
Dope. What makes you content?
A lot of food. Freddy's French fries. Making stuff. Getting that stuff out of you feels so good. And I think also just like having a lot of connections and friends and being very intentional about loving people.
Awesome. When will you be satisfied?
Great question. I have yet to find a point. Like just now I started getting into screenwriting. I'm like, I just think I'll always be exploring new things. I think I'm pretty good now at convincing myself that even if I'm not good at it, I will be happy that I did it. So I just keep on doing things. But I do get a lot of, I think I would be really satisfied when like each community that I'm in has like an intentional practice in loving each other. I think a lot of communities, most communities even accidentally do that. I think I'd love for us to see love as less of something you fall into and more of like something you can do.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people in general?
You are more than what you can give to other people. Try something. You will probably be bad at it. Do it again. Love on purpose and love people. If you find yourself very frustrated with how people love you, then maybe look inwards and look outwards and decide if there's something in you or if there's something in those people that maybe is incongruent.
Mm-hmm. Plus, you can like say something.
Totally. That's the part of like, just, yeah, I think like, I almost wish there was like a class on here's how you make friends when you're done with college. Cause like, I didn't go to college. So I see a lot of like people pop out and they're like, it's so hard. I'm so lonely. And I'm like, well, you have to ask people to hang out with you all the time. It is humiliating at first, but that's what you have to do. You have to insist yourself upon other people's lives and then they will insist themselves upon yours.
Yeah. Or you can start a podcast. That's how I did it.
All right. Well, we got Mr. Lifehack over here.
It's just kind of the way that it's turned out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Lastly, potentially most importantly, cake or pie?
I'm a cake guy.
Okay.
Yellow cake with chocolate frosting. I'm set. I also don't like most pies. I know that's like not like there's a hush in the distance, but yeah, like cooked fruit is rarely good. Like just put it in raw on some bread, maybe toasted bread, but yeah,
don't cook the fruit, cook the bread twice.
Yes. See, we're getting along so well.
Not the first time that yellow cake with chocolate frosting has been said, and also not the first time that someone has said don't like cooked fruit. So
okay, see, my experience was not that unique, and I could connect with other people.
yes. I can't tell you which episodes those were, but yeah, there are other humans that are like you.
I think I remember the yellow cake episode too. I just can't remember for the life of me. Yeah,
it's fine.
I want to say it was a Norman person, but yeah.
Rowan, thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Where can people find you and your things?
I'm on as Rowan Oakey, ROWANOAKIE on Instagram. And then follow You Had to Be There at You Had to Be There. Okay. We're an improv troupe, which I know is scary, but I promise we're usually very funny. We do road trips based on your inside jokes. So if you have an inside joke, our next show is March 24th at 9:30 at the OKCI Theater.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Once again, thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah. Thank you.
What's playing at the end of this?
Twig. Let's do Twig. Okay.
I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Rowan Weathers.
You to the lake, see that smile grow across your face. You called me drunk once just to read me a poem. In the car you sang to me. How can you be so good? Slowing us down, but I think you're precious and worth every second. So when your weary heart wakes, when I go round the shore, we can take a trip to the mountains. Make more memories with you.
Okay, ready? Alright, cheers.
Why would they want to do that? I don't know. They're just bananas.
You must retrieve the horn of Jorgen Windcaller.
Please try for me.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music and produce audio. The music you're hearing now is music I made. You can listen to official releases by Santiago Ramones on Spotify, Apple Music, and the other streaming places. Or you can support me directly by buying my music on Bandcamp. I'm working on Hypothetical, my first singer-songwriter album, so if you'd like to hear that at some point, I'm so close, I promise. There are lots of ways to support me on my website. There's a Discord server in which we discuss deep topics from the podcast, but it's also a community of beautiful human beings. All the links to these things are on my website, santiagoramones.com. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you listen there. It means a lot to me to hear what you have to say about it, and you're helping me without having to spend a single cent on me. I want to help the world have deeper conversations, so thank you for listening to and supporting Bit Depth. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.